so we have a little announcement, which is that Wrong About Everything is going to go on a bit of a hiatus for like a couple or so weeks, and in part because this year, like, so we've been doing this for a long time. We've been doing this literally almost 10 years. Like in May, it'll be 10 years. And for most of that time, for probably the first 7 years, we might have taken 1 week off. Like we really rarely took any time off. We always try to have some.
And thank you to the subs and all of that, like our substitutes that come in, our co-hosts,
absolutely,
guests of the show. We're grateful to you.
But this year, and you probably heard me say this on the show, but like the Trump years were hard on this podcast, and like this last, like I will say, 2023, like it was fun doing the podcast again. Like it was just like, and Davis was just such a fantastic addition and like funny and we're like, and it just felt like, oh, like we're back to like we disagree, but we can have a nice time conversing together or whatever. We can be civil with each other. Or more than civil, actually be friends. But you probably heard me say this on the show, like I've said a bunch of times, like that the Trump years made this podcast a lot harder to do, but also make it feel more important that we do it. Because you know, I when I talk about the origin story about our podcast, about the podcast, I always say like the original idea I had was that was sort of an experiment in like that we live really siloed lives in the United States today, in modern society just generally, and siloed, really not just politically siloed. We're used to talking about political polarization these days, but our silos are actually really, really extreme in this society. And this is shown by social science. It's not just right. It's that where you live, you are most likely live near people who look like you, who are the same class of you, who are the same educational status, like that. There's been, the book Sorting of America.
Even beyond political, right? And by the way, that's why so many congressional seats are not competitive.
Right.
People move to where people think like them. It's right.
Yeah. So I thought about this a lot as the president of a labor union representing janitors and security officers, because like in janitors, like literally like work in the same building as office workers, work at night. They don't see each other. And I realized what I loved about being in that job was that I worked in progressive politics now almost full 2 decades, and there are a lot of people who work on policy every day that impacts poor people who don't know any poor people. And I say that not with judgment, as with a description, just as a description of how siloed our lives are, right? That like often, like even if that's where if those are your origins, where you come from, once you become educated, you get an education, you get a lot of education, that I know that if I were not as president of Local 26 for those 14 years that I led the union, that I was in deep relationship with members who were working poor folks, and that I would otherwise probably not see them.
You went to Yale. You went to University of Michigan, right? You Gustavus.
Yeah.
Was it Gustavus? Yeah.
No, Carleton.
Carleton. Sorry. Carleton. Sorry.
She's than that. So to me, what this podcast was about is like, can we bring together people who disagree? And especially it was really important that we be fun and funny with each other, because humor is about crossing boundaries. Why are fart jokes funny? Because you're not supposed to fart in public, or why are farts funny? You just sort of like anything that interrupts, that like breaks a boundary, like that. That's a place say for humor. So, but what your boundaries are depend on like who you're with, right? Like,
and anybody who's listening to this, you have friends that you have jokes with that you could never ever share with anyone, because you'd all
canceled.
Get canceled. Right. And
right. And it's all cool
your
because
friend
in your friend group,
you can say things.
There are understandings that you have. And so what would it be like? And so like I've really like this has been like a wild journey, like these almost 10 years on this podcast. Started out with Brian, who I had met doing punditry sort of stuff.
Regional celebrity stuff.
Yeah. And we originally, like, for those of you who don't know the origin story of the podcast, it was me and Denise Cardinal, who like leads the donor table and the Alliance for Better Minnesota work. Like, that's not her title anymore. She does not even.
No. She's some big high money.
But she's very, very important and
more.
Can't
even be on the podcast anymore. It's way too important.
Oh, back when she was used to be on, it was and Republican guests would come on. They'd meet her and be like, "Oh, so you're Voldemort?" Like, because they're like, "Wow, you seem like this nice blonde soccer mom." She's like, "Yes, I'm also that, and I'll eviscerate you." But she like then got a job that didn't allow her to be on the podcast, whatever. But we were. The idea was we wanted to be two Democrats, 2 Republicans, and a man and woman and each, but we couldn't find plenty of Republican women. And in the early days of the podcast, so you do the math, 10 years ago, that was 2014,
right, and you were forming up like 2013. So
yeah,
I was not in a space.
Yeah.
I was unavailable, and I was not laughing about much.
And by unavailable, meaning you were in the fetal position a lot of that time.
Exactly.
Like
exactly.
Post.
For anybody who doesn't know, just Google.
Yeah.
But I can't imagine that anybody does.
Yeah. No one listens to this podcast.
Right.
And so, so Amy was unavailable. Then after a couple, I think you 2 years you came on?
Yeah. So you had actually Mike Franklin was the funny Republican woman, and it was kind of a joke on like Republicans, the war on women. And then, I think I started like doing some subbing for Mike. And then 2015, Mike was just like,
I'm done.
This should be you.
Yeah,
you're gonna take this over.
Yeah.
And so I did. So that's been 9 years.
Yeah. That is wild.
That is wild.
And Amy and I, for like, we joke about this all the time. I always say whenever we often do like the Humphrey Institute, like it brings us in to talk to fellows because we are the rare example of public people who are partisans and are actually friends.
Like friends.
And gay people will sometimes ask me, "Is like, wait, isn't she the person who tried to put ban safe?" I'm like, yes. Amy Koch was the only person invited to my wedding who tried to ban it from happening.
And I say, not yours specifically.
Yeah, which is I love that you always think that's a comeback, and it's not really better. It's not really better.
No, I realize, but I have nothing.
We have nothing.
Yeah.
But actually, our anniversary was just on the 7th.
I said, time to get to choring.
Yeah. Amy offers to do chores every year on our wedding anniversary. But like we actually became like
right. And what we try to tell people that is because everybody's like got family, right, that they've been at war with, or they've got close friends that they've lost over a political argument, or coworkers that they can't stand, whatever it is. And we like to tell our story because we were in the political arena.
Yeah.
I was the Senate Majority Leader when the marriage amendment was put on the ballot.
Yeah.
You
I
obviously
hated your guts.
Right. The first time we met was at a Min roast, and I was on stage and I was doing jokes after it was 2013. It was after everything had fallen apart for me, and I came out and I was really afraid to do it, but they invited me, and it was like, no, it's time to like come back. And I
was super annoyed because you were actually really funny,
right?
And I was really like, oh, Amy Koch's here, she's gonna bomb, and she did not bomb. She was very, very funny.
Yeah. So then afterwards, you came up to me and said, "Hey, okay, that was funny."
Yeah.
Like that, and we took a selfie together.
Yeah.
And you posted it on Twitter.
Yeah.
The last time you talked about me on Twitter was very, very mean, and this time it was more like, "So then this happened," which is not nice, but you could see that you were softening.
Well, I was softening. Yeah. No. And for those interested in like kind of Amy and Amy's evolution on thinking about the issues of marriage and stuff, look up a Daily Beast article. That's if you Google Amy Koch and Daily Beast, it'll come up, and read that article.
It was a 2016 article after Trump was elected the first time.
Yeah, that's Jesus.
That's what it was. After he was elected the first time, because the reporter wanted to talk to me about sort of the idea of women and in politics and sex scandals, and because at the time, of course, Donald Trump had just won, and then Petraeus, who had been in an affair with a a subordinate, and there was some possible leaking of classified material, and he was being considered for Secretary of State, and she was being brought up on courts martial. So
yeah, the title of that article is "Cheating Men Get a Second Life in Politics. Cheating Women Get a Scarlet Letter." And I'll just say one of the things that I've genuinely like admire about Amy, about you, is that 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 you could still be in that fetal position. You could have just stayed like, but you have a natural talent for politics. You're good at it. Like sometimes annoyingly good. And you could have just disappeared. But you did come. It took some time, whatever.
Took some time. I thought about disappeaing.
Yeah,
a few times,
I'm sure. Yeah, you had the Maple Leaf Bowl. I remember that. And so anyway, I like.
So there we were, two very separate people, and then I was invited on the podcast and to sub for Mike Franklin, and people will say, like, so how does that happen? How does that work? One, I think that we enjoyed each other's humor. Like, I always say, steel, like iron sharpens iron. And what I appreciate about Javi is it's really like he brings his A game to every argument. And he forces me. People say, well, like, I think people would think that, well, somehow that makes me less of a Republican. What it forces me to do is crystallize why I am a Republican. And I can go, and I grew up in Wright County, and it is the most conservative district in the state. And I come from a Republican family, and I had one of the most conservative voting records in the Senate. And so I can go to Wright County and I can have political conversations all day that don't really force me to make arguments about why I believe what I believe, because everybody believes what I believe. And what I find is that when you get in a room with someone who kind of like puts that onus on you to work harder at it, like that actually makes you understand better why you believe what you believe. And sometimes, yes, you change your views because that's what questioning is. But, faith isn't faith unless it's tested. And a belief isn't a belief unless it's tested. It should be tested.
Yeah. And I think like, even when, like, one of the things that I really have appreciated about the show over the years, right, is that's like when we were, because listeners, long-term listeners, you probably have many memories of like intense arguments. Yeah. Where then like two of us are going at it, like raising our voices, and then someone just says something stupid, like stupid joke or whatever, or Brian farts or whatever, like something happens that just breaks the ice, and you think about it that's like that happens in, like, if you think of like a family, like when big families get together, where like people can get like two cousins, whatever, are getting at it, and then someone says, settle down, or someone says, have some pie or whatever it is, like you're like, and that like to be able to get that level of escalation, and then to me that breaker of like the joke that brings the tempers down is the reminder of, to me it's a reminder of like, these are social boundaries, we're breaking boundaries, this is there's comedy in breaking boundaries, and that we are people, that we're people, we're humans, and we have to figure out a way like that. I don't have to like you guys, like what you guys say or stand for, but we do have to live in this worlds together.
And I also think that there's sometimes people that listen to us and then like kind of yell at their podcast, or they yell like at the YouTube because they want us to like come back. And sometimes it is about just listening,
right,
and being in the room, because the point is we are completely different. We believe very different things, but you have to be able to listen to people to just understand. And that is not to say that you need to sit in a room with someone that is abusive, right, or saying very ugly things. That's not what we're saying. But right, there are so many people listening to this that, that just fail, that like there's just an automatic wall that goes up for people now politically. It was funny. Two things. So first of all, to the fart thing. Someone just discovered our podcast over the weekend, a friend, and he texted me and he's like, hey, I just want to understand, I've never listened before. Finally, I caught some of the podcasts on YouTube and I thought it was so great. I was like, oh, awesome. Which episode? And he goes, it was JFK Jr. and the fart. And I was like, And it was like, I said, some of our finest work, I'm sure. Finest work. And honestly, I don't remember which one was specifically JFK Jr. and the fart. But I was like, that tracks. I was like, you're going to be more specific about the fart.
It's a reel on YouTube, just to let you know.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Gabe. Thank you, Gabe. I was like, oh, great. Our finest work.
Yeah.
So there's that.
And probably my favorite episode of all time was when Karen Roth is on the show. So you weren't on this episode, but it was a callback. It was the Mike Franklin days still. But it was when someone in the legislature had a bill to make it illegal to put bodily fluids into someone else's drink. And it was basically this case in Anoka or something that someone was, a man was ejaculating into like gross and all that. So but and the thing is, we were all like, couldn't believe it wasn't already legal to do that.
Right.
But the discussion around that got so absurd and so crazy and so like, and it was so, like,
I think you called it the Jizz Bill.
The Jizz Bill. That was Karen's moniker for it. And then that was back when we were in the other studio and had a button bar, and we had what's her name? Carly Simon. Clouds in my coffee. Oh, clouds in my... And Mike Franklin was like, is that what that's about? Anyway, so some of our funnest times together were silliest and not about politics at all. And also some of the times that I remember most are times when we're making fun of our own party. We're not, like, you know, because like, you know, I think part of the weird thing about polarization, right, is that you feel like you have to defend your own even when you don't, and that's just dumb.
There's a latest poll coming out now where now college Republicans are kind of college educated have not been Trump, right? They've not been voting for Trump. And now the New York Times has got a poll that shows them sort of coming back to Trump. And somebody from the Daily Telegraph called me and said, why is this happening? And I said, I think it's because people are like, it's coming down to Biden and Trump. It's clarifying that that's what it's going to be. And we still feel like we got to put on that jersey, right? We're so in our silos that, you know, people are just like, well, I can't have this choice, so I must have this choice. I must choose. And that's where I'm going.
Yeah. And so, you know, some real talk here. So we're going to take a little time to figure out, and if any of y'all, this is an honest request, if any of y'all have ideas about format, about how to do things a little differently, like how I've thought about, like, maybe we go to, like, you know, doing like, you know, every other week and have it be kind of more of a book club that focused on it on like we're like maybe reading that Timothy Snyder book or things like that, or just like, because I do like, so once the new year started, this last episode we were going to take, I will, like, just speaking for myself, the Trump years were harder again, but made this feel more important. And also, as I've seen Republicans and national Republicans and others get in line, minimize January 6th, and do all the things that you have to do as a partisan to get yourself in this deal. Like, you know, like in normal elections, right? Like I always never tire of pointing out to people like, you love Hillary Clinton. I was like, go back and listen to the episodes that, like, to like, I came kicking and streaming to Hillary Clinton, but then it was the Jersey and whatever. And I do, like, think that that right now this is a particularly different and different kind of danger, and I don't know that I can handle emotionally, like, in this year, the sort of being publicly processing all that's going on when I fundamentally believe that we are playing to script in a way that could lead to some really ugly things.
So if I can say a couple things that maybe help with the darkness of me.
Like,
a couple things.
Different meds?
I mean, you know, that's between you and your doctor. No. So we started this by saying no one gets into politics as deeply as, like, politicos like us, right? We eat it, sleep it, breathe it. And that most people just aren't paying attention to much of anything.
Right.
So when you put a lot of, like, well, like when you put so much in, like about January 6th, and or about like when Trump says, hearkening things back to like people are people, and they didn't follow, people didn't even follow January 6th as closely as they might, and people's memories are short. And that's not to say, so there was an article, and I sent to you about the January 6th shaman, right? And remember, everybody remembers him. He was the guy in the loincloth with the crazy horns, and he was standing on the Senate floor or the House floor, like on the podium,
right?
And they had an article about like, where is he now? And I believe he went to jail for a while, and he's out now. And he still says he loves Trump, but he's not supporting Trump. He doesn't think that Trump should run again, which is interesting. But like, if people aren't as engaged, then that means, I think that's why I don't know how to say this. I'm not that bleak about the country, because I unfortunately, or fortunately, people are about their lives, right? They're about what's happening in front of them, about their jobs and about their kids and about their families, and maybe what they're going to do on a Friday night. My brother, who is a like hardcore right-counting conservative, a month and a half ago, we were talking about the primaries, and he said, "Well, we're not gonna have Trump. Trump's not gonna win again, is he?" And this is my brother, who pays really had played a lot of close attention to. And I said, yeah, no, Trump is definitely likely the winner. And he was surprised. And so I don't know if I'm saying this very elegantly, but to say that, to put too much in, because people are not viewing politics as deeply as you are viewing them. They're much more surface, and they're not. People are inherently good, and they're inherently bad, and they're mostly focused on what's going on in their lives.
Oh yeah, no, I'm saying more like when I've met Tom Emmer on this podcast.
Yeah.
When Tom Emmer endorsed Donald Trump, I have met Tom Emmer. I don't know him very well. I know you all have been friendly, and I am speaking only as someone who like I do not believe one word of what he says. I don't believe that he supports Donald Trump. I don't believe he wants to. I think he could have been speaker and wasn't, because he wasn't sufficiently like ass kissing to Trump, and so he started posting pictures. It's like, it's degrading. It's embarrassing.
Yes.
That's the stuff where I'm like, at our level of politics, when I see, someone
that
like
kind of falling in line by leadership.
that kind of falling in line, and it requires so like, like I saw like once, and like Fritz Knack, who's like, your typical like kind of old school kind of moderate Republican sort of guy, like sort of making fun of Democrats for calling January 6th an insurrection. Like, so it was like, oh, that was a bunch of yahoos, whatever. And I'm like, if like that, it's that sort of thing where there's active minimizing of what happened, of the potential what happens, of like when like really at this point we're still going to say Trump doesn't mean it when he says things like, I'm going to be dictator just on day one, like, but just on day one, like, oh, or when what's his name is floating like the idea of concentration camps and a list, like, look, like it's just, we're just in really like freaky times, and again,
but we always survive. We always do. We went through a civil war. We went through multiple world wars. We went through Nazis in Congress, literal Nazis elected to Congress, sending out Nazi propaganda while the Nazis were on the march in Europe.
Yeah,
and we survived.
Many thousands and thousands and thousands of people died very violently in all of those situations.
Yes.
Like, so it's not like, oh, okay, so we'll get past this. It's just like,
but even January 6th, right? Like, people did the right thing.
Right.
People did the right thing.
Well, but yes. And the Senate, the Republican senators could have ended it all. Could have ended this whole damn thing if they had just convicted him, because he wouldn't be eligible to run for office again. And like, I fundamentally believe that like Joe Biden would have, like, if that had happened after winning, like Joe Biden would be on his way to retire in Delaware right now, and Democrats would have a different primary, and like you all would have who knows, all right, but that's not what happened. And so, like, in any case, listen to our listeners, I can't thank you enough. And I know this, I'm not saying, like I said, this is a hiatus while we figure things out. And we'll see how we come out on the other side. We're looking for ideas, working for thoughts, but I am, honestly trying to figure out a way to
Do you want more guests?
Yeah.
Like this, do you want more Amy? Is that probably, but we know.
Is it just us? Is it just, you could tell us. You can tell us. It's okay.
You can say it. We won't, that's not, yeah.
It's okay.
But
like because I do feel like, that I don't, I say like, this was a joint effort and all the way. And like, there were 4 of us at the time, and Brian and I were the 2 original people who started the podcast. But I named it. It was my idea, and this is sort of my baby. And I like it much better when it's fun to do. But also, it feels like giving up on this kind of project is like a little, like, feels like us giving up on the project of social cohesion, and I don't want to do that. At the same time, I don't want to be miserable. So yeah, we're open to all ideas and suggestions, and patrons to the front of the line, and also just patrons that are wondering, like, while we're figuring this out, we'll put a pause on folks contributions, and we greatly appreciate everyone who has been not a dick for all of this time, and the rest of you, seriously, like, what did it take? What's it gonna take?